Coming up on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto this week.
I think in terms of marijuana, and legalization, I think that should be a state issue, state by state.
The way they're doing it in Florida, I think, is going to be actually good.
That was Trump, the candidate, in September of 2024, and this week...
But we're looking at reclassification, and we'll make a determination over the next few weeks.
That was Trump, the president, on Monday, the 11th. So now what? Well, a Republican congressman from Florida, Greg Steube, files a bill this week that delivers on that rescheduling effort. We'll hear from NORML's Morgan Fox.
When you heard about this press conference, what was your reaction?
Well, I think that my first reaction was it's about time.
Plus, the DEA continues its prohibitionist focus with an anti-cannabis campaign and now will turn its focus on the growing concern about China's involvement with their illegal grows. And Massachusetts legislators want to continue to audit the Cannabis Control Commission's mismanagement complaints, including one from a testing lab that it fined for $300,000. Plus, the Women in Cannabis Expo celebrates female leadership in the industry at their annual convention in Reno, Nevada. All that and state reports from coast to coast on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cannabis Coast to Coast News, WPCM TV's record of the fight to end cannabis prohibition in this country and around the world. I'm Alaina Pinto. If you want to continue to follow the fight to end cannabis prohibition, this is the place to do that, and you can make it much easier. If you want to, you can download our app for free, and all you have to do is just scan the QR code on the screen, and that will take you to Google Play or the App Store. If you want to search for it, then search PCM Space TV. First up this week, there is renewed hope for federal reform of cannabis laws, or at least the rescheduling effort. For the first time during his presidency, Donald Trump addressed a question from the media on the rescheduling effort of cannabis from Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act to Schedule 3. While the industry would still like to see the plant medicine completely descheduled, a move off the most restrictive classification would be a major win. A week ago, at a news conference about increasing the federal law enforcement presence in the District of Columbia, the president made his first public comment on the possibility of rescheduling.
There is reporting that the administration is going to reclassify marijuana. Would that send mixed messages that if marijuana is okay, some drugs are okay, or we're trying to clean up crime? How do they go hand in hand?
We're only looking at that. That's early, but somebody reported it, which is fine. We're looking at it. Some people like it. Some people hate it. Some people hate the whole concept of marijuana because if it does bad for the children, it does bad for people that are older than children. But we're looking at reclassification, and we'll make a determination over the next few weeks. And that determination hopefully will be the right one. It's a very complicated subject, the subject of marijuana. I've heard great things having to do with medical, and I've had bad things having to do with just about everything else. But medical and, for pain and various things, I've heard some pretty good things. But for other things, I've heard some.
Not exactly an endorsement for the change, but even the mention of this possibility sent the publicly traded stocks in the cannabis industry soaring, and Doug Miller will have more on that in his High on Wall Street segment coming up. But first, let's get analysis from Andrew Behringer in Washington, D.C.
I'm Andrew Behringer with the Washington, D.C. report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. In a high-profile fundraiser recently, President Donald Trump indicated he is reevaluating the federal government's stance on cannabis, suggesting a potential shift in policy. Trump revealed he's looking at a Biden-era proposal to ease federal restrictions on cannabis, which has also been on hold since January, the rescheduling process that we all know and have been following very intently. The pause process is involved hearings overseen by the DEA, but the agency's chief, Terrence Cole, has the discretion to accept, reject, or resume discussions. Now, Cole, known for his conservative background, is expected to follow the White House guidance. No matter what, Trump's position appears influenced by industry lobbying. Cannabis groups have poured money into campaigns and strategists, praising his attention to their issues. However, within his own political base, opinions are divided, with some conservatives opposing legalization, citing concerns over adult use affecting children and seniors. Now, during that fundraiser, Trump described the issue as very complicated, acknowledging potential medical benefits, but raising concerns about adult use consumption. While he hasn't committed to a specific stance, his comments suggest he is weighing economic, political, and social factors. Now, meanwhile, a GOP congressman, Representative Greg Steube, has introduced legislation, the Marijuana 1 to 3 Act, to make the policy change more permanent by moving cannabis from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3 under the Controlled Substances Act. Now, that bill would require the Attorney General to reclassify cannabis within 60 days of its passage, potentially solidifying reform despite ongoing debates. As the DEA and the White House negotiations continue, all eyes are on this story and how it will unfold, and whether we could see a major shift in federal cannabis policy in the coming weeks, as promised. Well, that's the Washington, D.C. report. I'm Andrew Behringer. Make sure to tune in next week.
When you heard about this press conference, what was your reaction?
Well, I think that my first reaction was it's about time. Trump has previously expressed support for rescheduling and for legalization, at least in terms of Florida, and has made supportive comments about medical in the past. His comments at the press conference were a little bit tepid and looked like he was kind of trying to play both sides. But at the same time, I think that it is incredibly important that this process is supposedly going to begin moving forward again. Now, I would just like to temper that with, even if Trump decides to call for rescheduling, that the process could still take quite a while. This isn't necessarily going to be an immediate thing, even if the drug warrior Terrence Cole that he appointed to the head of the DEA moves forward with this with all due haste. The process can still be slowed down through litigation. For an example, in 1990, NORML sued the federal government because of a DEA ruling that went against the advice of an administrative law judge, and it took 4 years to get a ruling on that. So regardless of what the president might end up saying in a few weeks regarding rescheduling, it's entirely possible that the actual process of moving towards that could take quite a while.
Needless to say, just the mention of rescheduling gave a little boost to many in the industry who have been struggling with crashing valuations, receiverships, and the huge debt that is coming due in 2026. Remember, even if cannabis gets rescheduled off the most restrictive classification of the Controlled Substances Act, it does not legalize the plant. It will, however, allow Congress the opportunity to take the next step, including safe banking and perhaps interstate commerce. Most importantly, it will rid cannabis businesses from dealing with the restrictions of the 280E clause in the tax code. That's the best example of the unfair treatment of not allowing the industry the same rights for tax write-offs that every other business has in the United States. But perhaps the biggest win for cannabis will be the recognition that this plant does have some medicinal value, which almost 90% of Americans understand already. As you might expect, the publicly traded cannabis stocks that have really been losing their value lately enjoyed a rally. Our man who is high on Wall Street every week is Doug Miller. Here's his analysis on the impact rescheduling might have on the industry.
I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's Cannabis Stock Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Big news out of Washington as President Trump confirmed this week that his administration is seriously considering rescheduling marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 with a decision expected in the coming weeks. What does that mean for the cannabis industry? Well, companies would finally escape the crushing burden of IRS Rule 280E, which prevents them from writing off basic expenses like payroll and rent. That alone could turn red ink into black for some of the largest MSOs, so they can finally enjoy some green. On top of that, rescheduling would open the doors to banking, credit access, and institutional investment, three things this industry's been waiting on for years. Investors are already reacting with cannabis stocks ripping higher on the news. Now the big question is, how do we trade it? Let's pull up the ETF MSOS's chart. This fund tracks U.S. cannabis operators, and the volume surged as the market priced in the potential tax relief and growth opportunity. If Trump follows through, MSOS could have more room to run. It is trading around $4.55, and it's pulling back after it had that big run up. I'm expecting a little bit of pullback so they can get set back up for these next few weeks. And if Trump does reschedule cannabis, this cannabis stocks will pop. And that's this week's Cannabis Stock Report. Reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, I'm Doug Miller.
In the meantime, this mention of rescheduling was not received positively by a lot of lawmakers in Washington, D.C., who would like to see cannabis remain at Schedule 1. That includes the DEA, now headed up by prohibitionist Terrence Cole. He is now wearing two hats as the newly named head of the Washington, D.C. Police Department. Cole has a background in law enforcement and was President Trump's pick this week to oversee the operation of the federal takeover of the District of Columbia this past week. The DEA continues to fuel the public with anti-cannabis rhetoric, including a social media contest urging young people to create memes that fuel the stigma that has existed around this plant for decades. That stigma continues to separate two of the most powerful political people in the state of Texas, the Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, and the Governor, Greg Abbott. Patrick wants a total ban on intoxicating THC products, and Governor Greg Abbott already vetoed one attempt by Patrick to get his way with a hemp ban bill. The governor wanted regulation, not a ban. The special session was called for by the governor, and it was supposed to come up with a bill that regulates these products. Well, now a second session might have to be called because Democrats in that state walked out of the state house in protest of another controversy in Texas, this one over redistricting. Those new boundaries would favor the Republican majority in their legislature. Kerry Hinkle is our man in hemp, and he has an update on what is going on in the Lone Star State.
This is Kerry Hinkle with Bayou City Hemp out of Houston, Texas, and I am back again with another hemp report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. This week, the second week of August, we stay in our home state of Texas as the political stage has gone national as the Democrats have left the state, throwing everything in the first special session on the call sheet out the window. Now, interestingly, on Wednesday of this week, we saw the hemp ban bill in the House, HB 5, go through a 13 or 14 hour long hearing process with hundreds of people there to testify, some for the ban, the majority against, including our own CEO was there to testify as well. Now, because the Democrats have left, we understood that this bill was unlikely to get voted out of committee, and that's exactly what happened. The bill was left pending. And then as of today, which is now August 15th, Friday, the second special session has now been called, and on the proclamation of the special session, the governor added yet again that he would like to see hemp products regulated and not banned and sold to adults that were 21 and over, banning of synthetics and other guardrails that were in place in his first proclamation of the special session. And immediately after the governor issued his proclamation for special session number 2, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick sat up on the dais and said yet again, the governor wants to legalize THC and I will stop at nothing but a complete ban. And so it is the two most powerful figures in Texas politics continuing to butt their heads over this issue of hemp and THC and whether or not it should be regulated or banned. And so Lieutenant Governor, in true fashion, issued now SB 6 as the third version of his attempt to ban the category. You may remember he had SB 3 during regular session, SB 5 during the first special, now SB 6. And so, again, we will see as this plays out. We anticipate the Democrats will come back for the special session. We anticipate issues larger than hemp to hopefully be tackled. But as always, the craziness of hemp policy is continuing to play out in the Lone Star State. So, again, I'm Kerry Hinkle with Bayou City Hemp, and I will be back again for another hemp report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. We'll see you next week.
It's been a crazy few weeks in Massachusetts. The Cannabis Control Commission finally released social consumption regulations that were part of the original laws passed by ballot in 2016. Now, a public comment period is starting before they can start issuing them. On top of that, the state legislature wants to continue to audit the CCC operations because of past complaints about mismanagement. Curtis Emery is our Bay State beat reporter, and he tries to sort all of this out.
I'm Curtis Emery, a bud tender from Resonate in Worcester, Massachusetts, with the Bay State Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Some positive news here out of Massachusetts. A Haverhill dispensary was awarded $500,000 in a CCC grant. STEM in Haverhill was awarded a CCC grant as part of the CCC Social Equity Program. STEM, who is owned by Alaina Pinto, a woman who was recently made news here in Massachusetts after suing the city of Haverhill over an unfair community impact fee. She was awarded victory in that case and is now planning to do some major renovations at her historic location in Haverhill. This grant will be used to help upgrade this historic building that STEM's located in, paving the way for the future of cannabis in Mass, specifically social consumption. Social consumption is a soon-to-be big deal here in Massachusetts, and now it's not completely voted on yet by the CCC. The CCC has released its plan for social consumption here in Massachusetts. The social consumption framework, which was voted on in this summer, is now available for public input on the CCC's website. After this short period of public input, that new framework will be voted on to be official law here in Massachusetts. That vote is slated to take place later this fall. Speaking of the CCC, a state audit has uncovered a widely mismanaged CCC. The CCC is in hot water right now as their state audit covering the periods from 2022 to 2024 uncovered mismanagement on pretty much every aspect of the Cannabis Control Commission. This includes, everything from toxic workplace to lapses in regulatory enforcement, also discriminatory regulatory enforcement, which could include large community impact fees for some dispensaries, while other dispensaries aren't asked to pay anything as part of their licenses. The audit also uncovered favoritism at the CCC. It seems that the body favored companies that are like MSOs or larger franchise companies, leaving companies that are locally owned, small owned, or equity owned at a disadvantage in the state. Hopefully, as the CCC moves through these issues, we'll find a better run and a more efficient control commission, which is so important to legal cannabis here in the state. Also news out of the CCC, Bruce Stebbins has been reappointed to his position as the acting chair of the CCC, and he will remain in that position for his term of 5 years or until a new permanent solution has been found by the state. We hope that he continues to bring quality work that he offered before and help steer the CCC in a positive direction. I've been Curtis Emery with the Bay State Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Amy Carter is off this week, but in Michigan, there's been a major recall of vapes that have been flagged for a recall. This is not just a few items. It's a huge recall of over 26,000 vape cartridges that contain a product that was banned by regulators. The culprit is MCT oil, which is medium chain triglyceride. Now, while it is safe to consume it, regulators have made it very clear that they will be testing for that additive. The Cannabis Regulatory Authority identified Sky Cannabis in Warren, Michigan, as the distributor of these tainted cartridges. Last week, the distributor offered a voluntary recall for anyone who has these carts, and now they are being pulled off shelves of multiple dispensaries in that state. If you happen to have any of these products, you can check the regulatory board's website for the metric number to see if you have one of these products. In the meantime, lab testing results continues to be a major issue in many states, and now it looks like Oklahoma may be the next state with issues. With more on the story, here's Kimmie Cannabis.
I am Kimmie Cannabis from Can I Talk About It with the Oklahoma Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Greenleaf Labs has been ordered to cease operations after a compliance inspection raised serious product safety concerns. OMMA officials report that cannabis products tested by Greenleaf between April 2023 and July 31st, 2025 may be contaminated. On August 13th, they posted that nearly 19,000 samples originally marked as test passed in metric were suddenly changed to test failed due to erroneous yeast and mold testing. Because of the immediate risk to public health and safety, OMMA has suspended Greenleaf Labs' license on an emergency basis. Dispensaries should expect to see inventory flagged and are advised to begin removing those products now. OMMA is conducting package tracing for an official embargo and recall. Businesses with pending samples at Greenleaf are encouraged to resubmit them to a different lab, and products that fail for microbials may be retested under OMMA rules. Now, with patient concern in mind, it's important to remember we consume yeast and mold every day. These Greenleaf tested samples had passed under the state's allowable threshold of 10,000. When cannabis is lit on fire or heated in the oven, it kills these microbials. It is unlikely that patients will experience any physical harm. We'll continue to follow this unfortunate circumstance as it unfolds. That's it for the Oklahoma Cannabis Report. Peace, love, and all that good stuff.
I'm Jennifer Boozer Stewart, reporting from Alabama for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. The election cycle is already heating up in Alabama, and we will be voting for over 400 elected positions across the state between now and November 2026. After the crushing session in 2025, the cannabis industry, along with the hemp industry, are combining forces to do something about this Republican supermajority that seems to want to railroad both industries. The Alabama Cannabis Coalition, spearheaded by Marty Shelper, is vetting all 400-plus candidates across the state, asking how they stand on HB 445, the hemp industry, and the 4 years defunct Alabama Medical Cannabis Commission and Cannabis Program. We will be voting this year, and if one issue seems to be able to bring together the people of Alabama, it's the plant. I don't think they realize the sleeping giant they've woken, and with very little support from outside of Alabama from the national industry, we're kind of on our own here. But we are vetting these candidates, and in partnership with the Alabama Cannabis Coalition, I, along with my radio show, Sweet Home Cannabama, are interviewing as many pro-hemp and cannabis candidates as we can get on the show. So stay tuned every Monday night at 7 o'clock, www.fmtalk1065.com, or on our Sweet Home Cannabama YouTube page. We will be interviewing this week a gubernatorial candidate by the name of Dr. Will Boyd, who is very outspokenly pro-hemp and cannabis and has even published a hybrid hemp program that he would like to implement if he were elected governor. I'm Jennifer Boozer, reporting from Alabama with Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
That'll do it for the A Block this week, but we have plenty more state reports for you, including images from the Women in Cannabis Expo this past week in Nevada. Hundreds of attendees networked and learned about ways to combat the stigma that this industry continues to deal with, and salute and recognize many female leaders in the industry. In fact, one of our correspondents won an award for Best Canna Mom, and we'll tell you about that when Cannabis Coast to Coast News continues after this break.
Your cannabis business could be overpaying by hundreds of thousands of dollars in federal income taxes because of one simple assumption that you're making about your accountant. A dispensary owner in Colorado called me frustrated as hell. He'd been working with the same accountant for 3 years. His accountant said, "What's 471C?" Here's what the ignorance of that accountant was costing this business owner: $180,000 every single year for 3 years. 471C has been around since 2017. We're talking about an 8-year-old tax provision that many cannabis CPAs don't fully understand. 471C is one of the most complex and highly debated tax strategies in the cannabis industry. If you want to make sure you're not leaving any money on the table, I'm offering free 471C reviews this month. Link in the description.
Accounting Buds has grown into Buds Group, the same award-winning quality, now with more service offerings. Buds Group, your best buds in the biz.
Looking for PR that over-delivers on expectations? At Maverick Public Relations, they pair big agency experience with personalized attention. From launching award-winning brands to securing top-tier media hits, their data-driven communications team helps visionary leaders and entrepreneurs rise above the media noise. Maverick PR is responsive, collaborative, and relentless about results and ROI. Visit themaverickpr.com and make headlines together.
If you want to make history, if you want to be part of history, if you want to say you helped legalize marijuana in America, now is the time to join us.